sadhu sangha, and bhajana kriya, and anartha nivritti, nishta, ruchi, asakti, bhava, and prema. And in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, these stages are described in relation to the progress of Narada Muni. Once he listened to the sages, when he was, the sages had come and he was serving them. And then he began to develop his bhakti. So there's a description of the different stages of bhakti there. So based on that, Vishnu Chakravarti has written a little book to explain those different stages for us, which otherwise we wouldn't have. We don't have a detailed explanation of those stages anywhere else. So it is significant for us to give us a little guidance on our path of bhakti. So it's a very small book, actually, and written in prose, but quite compact as well in its explanation. Kadambini actually means a group of rain clouds. So it's a sweet group of rain clouds, so to speak. And this analogy is used to describe the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in spreading bhakti. So this Madhurya Kadambini is actually the unlimited mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Just as a cloud or a group of clouds will start to shower rain, so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu showers mercy. And this nourishes the seeds of bhakti. Just as rain nourishes the seeds, so the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu begins to nourish the seeds of bhakti and help them grow. Of course, Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur is putting himself in a very humble position, and he describes himself as just like a dried up tree in the desert. And this rain cloud of mercy is expected by everybody in the desert. And when that rain comes, and then people become joyful, plants begin to grow, etc. in the universe, and in terms of bhakti, heat of lust and whatever dries up, and then we get something flourishing. So Madhurya Kadambini, in other words, is the mercy of the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to help us develop our bhakti. Wow. Okay, so he begins this work with a little bit of a description of the Supreme Lord. And he goes back into the Upanishads and he quotes some Taittiriya Upanishad, where it says, Rasa Vaisaha Rasam Hi Evayam Labdvanandi Bhavati. The Lord is Rasa itself. Attaining that Rasa, the jiva becomes blissful. So Rasa and the Lord and bliss are more or less synonymous. And of course we'll find many statements in scripture that talk about Ananda. The Brahman is Ananda, or the Lord is Ananda. His essence is Ananda. Brahma Sutras also says the same thing, that the essential character of the Lord is bliss. But that bliss is expressed through rasa. So therefore, the idea of rasa of the Lord, which indicates a relationship between the Lord and someone else, this is the basis of bliss in the spiritual world. And of course, bliss for the jiva. So the jiva, if he attains rasa by having a relationship with the Lord, and the Lord is also blissful, the jiva becomes blissful. So rasa is actually a combination, like like we have colors, etc., that combine to make new colors, etc. So we have ingredients of rasa. We have these are described in the southern section of the Nectar Devotion. Ingredients of rasa. It's a chapter, 5 chapters on each of these different elements. So we have vibhava, That means Krishna and the devotee. We have Sthayi Bhava, the basic loving attitude. It could be Shanta, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, or Madhurya. We have Anubhavs, actions. Krishna does actions. Devotees do actions, which we can call active devotional service. Like the gopis may pick flowers, or the gopis may make garlands, the gopis may sing, the cowherd boys may play with Krishna. That's all called Anubhava. So it's an expression of their love for Krishna. We have Sattvika Bhavas, which are unconscious actions of the body, such as crying, fainting, shivering of the body, etc. And we have Vyabhichari Bhavas, slight emotions like regret, fear, etc. So these combine together in different proportions, and that produces rasa. So it's not just dasya or sakya or vatsalya, but it's that combining with these other elements of action and sub-emotions and sattvika bhavas, etc. And then we get the rasa finally result. So this is colors combined, and we can do so many things with colors. We can do so many things with 3 colors actually. I think in your computer they have colors, and you can get how many millions of colors in your shades of color. The better the computer, I think, the more shades of colors it's got, like 6 million colors or something, from dark to light, mixtures and whatever like that. So it's all made up of basically three or four colors, and then combined together in different ways, and you get all these infinite number of combinations. So that rasa is like that. You can combine these different things in different proportions, and we get different tastes, different feelings within that loving relationship of dasya, etc. And then it becomes dasya rasa, or sakya rasa, or vatsalya rasa, or madhurya rasa. So it is not just the feeling for the Lord, but it is through the pastimes over spiritual time that we get these different tastes arising, experiences. And they're always different. So the Krishna is rasa, it's actually rasa. And of course, in Nectar Devotion, the first verse is Akila Rasa Mritamurti. Krishna is the very form of all rasas. All primary rasas, 5 primary rasas, and 7 secondary rasas. So they are displayed in Krishna in the most remarkable way, more than any other form of the Lord. And that is why he's considered the supreme form. Huh? So Krishna is so remarkable that simultaneously can manifest all those rasas at once for different people simultaneously. So there's a verse in the Bhagavatam that Vishwanath Chakravarti quotes. This is the verse which talks about Krishna when he enters the arena of Kamsa. And different people see him in different ways and experience different rasas simultaneously. They see him completely differently. Huh? And different rasas. So the wrestlers see him as a thunderbolt. A thunderbolt, or vajra, is the hardest substance, harder than diamonds. So Krishna appeared hard as diamonds, even though he's just a little boy, and the wrestlers were huge. And other people were thinking, the wrestlers are going to crush Krishna because he's so little and they're so big. But the wrestlers saw him as invincible. So this is an expression of a certain rasa. In fighting, we have virya rasa, where there is a display of courage and valor, etc. So this expresses that virya rasa. The men of Mathura saw Krishna as the best of males, and they were completely astonished by his greatness, etc. So that's called adbhuta rasa, wonder, surprise, astonishment. The young women saw him as their lover, Madhurya Rasa, just as the gopis. The young women felt love for Krishna as Cupid. The cowherd boys came to Mathura with Krishna, and they laughed with him. They were joking with him when he went into the arena, because they knew that Krishna could kill all, wrestlers, because he had killed so many demons in Vrindavan. So they were joking with him. It's called Hasya Rasa. And they showed their friendship, Sakya Rasa. They were equals, joking. The impious rulers, the followers of Kamsa, saw him as a chastiser or punisher. And they saw him as if he were angry and he were punishing them. in spite of the fact that the gopis saw him as a sweet lover and the cowherd boy saw him as a joking friend. These impious kings saw him as an angry punisher. So that's an expression of Raudra Rasa, anger. Nanda and Vasudeva and Devaki, his parents, saw him as their child, Vatsalya Rasa, and they felt pity for him because he was so helpless, as Karuna Rasa, compassion. Kamsa saw him as death personified, fear. He was very frightful. That's Bhayanak Rasa, secondary Rasa, fear Rasa. The unintelligent people saw him as a material body, and they felt disgust, and they criticized him for his uncleanliness, because he came into the arena after killing the elephant, and he put the tusk on his shoulder, and he had blood on his body. So blood is impure. So the Purohits of Kamsa looked at disgust when they saw Krishna, and they said he's impure. He's just a, reject or whatever, like low-class person coming in an impure state before the king. So they criticized him with disgust. That's called Bibhatsa Rasa. The yogis saw him as the absolute truth. That's Shanta Rasa, very peaceful. And the Vrishnis saw him as the supreme worshipable deity. They understood he's the Supreme Lord. So that was Dasya Rasa. So there we have an expression of 12 rasas manifested simultaneously when Krishna appeared and different people saw him. So in this way, he is the source of all rasas. So, one can only experience that rasa when one gets to prema. And one can only get to prema by first practicing sadhana bhakti. So bhakti is very special. It is not like karma or jnana or astanga yoga. It is independent of everything, and it is independent of the material world and the three gunas. So, the other processes are connected with the gunas. Karma yoga is connected with tamaguna and rajaguna, and jnana is connected with sattva guna, and yoga is also connected with sattva guna. They arise out of sattva guna. If a brahmana, one becomes a brahmana by going through the varnashram system, he becomes qualified to do jnana or yoga. So they're connected with gunas. Bhakti does not depend on any guna. It can appear in any guna and beyond the gunas. So it's not connected with the material world at all. It appears by the will of Krishna. Just as the avatars appear by themselves and they're not connected with the gunas of the material world, bhakti also is like Krishna himself. It's not connected with or attached to or dependent on the gunas. However, Krishna and bhakti are attracted to devotees who have bhakti. So bhakti attracts bhakti. So we have a devotee, he's a jiva, and that jiva has bhakti, then that attracts more bhakti, that attracts Krishna. So therefore, the Lord becomes partial to the devotees. Although he's neutral, he becomes very attracted to the devotees and gives them special mercy. So, and therefore we have devotees in the material world. And they are the, you could say, the conduits of Krishna's mercy. It is through them that the bhakti flows into this world. It flows from Krishna through the devotee into the material world. So this is how the mercy of Krishna is expressed in the material world, through the devotees. So, what type of devotees? So Vishnu Chakravarti identifies the Madhyama devotee as the ideal devotee to spread the mercy of the Lord. And why is that? Because the Madhyama Adhikari has some special qualities. He is favorable to the Lord. He avoids the demons. He gives mercy to the innocent people. And he worships the Lord. And he associates with other devotees. If we go to the Uttamadhikari, on the other hand, he is completely absorbed in the Lord. and he sees no difference between devotees and demon, and he sees no necessity of preaching because everybody's a devotee, even the demons. Right? So it is the Madhyamadikari who sees devotees, demons, etc. He is the one who is the most qualified for preaching. So Krishna gives that Madhyamadikari his bhakti shakti, and he allows that devotee to, on his own, distribute that. The Lord does not tell the devotee where to give mercy, etc. He leaves it up to the Madhyamadikari devotee. So the Madhyamadikari devotee can spread his mercy wherever he wants to. So the Lord gives the Madhyamadikari that independence to do so. Spread mercy. I wonder why it's all blue. Mine's pink and it's blue. Everything's opposite color. I think Krishna's coming out green also. I don't know why. Okay, needs no matter. So, of course, in the Srimad Bhagavatam we have this verse that describes the Madhyamadikari and his particular characteristics. He has love for the Lord, sincere friend to the devotee, shows mercy to the ignorant people who are innocent and disregards those who are envious. So he shows mercy to the ignorant people. The Kanishta, on the other hand, not interested in devotees. He only recognizes the Lord in the temple, so he won't be a preacher. He has a little mercy of the Lord, but he's not interested in preaching, so he's not the main preacher, because he just worships in the temple. What about the Uttamadikari? He sees the Lord within everything and sees everything in the Supreme Lord. So he doesn't distinguish between devotees and demons. Everybody's got the mercy. So he sees no necessity of giving out mercy. So therefore, he's not the real preacher. So, this was Jiva's commentary. He says that one should contemplate the mood of the Lord within oneself as being present in all living entities. So the Lord is full of all wonderful prema, etc. So he sees all living entities similarly with that prema. And we see examples like the gopis. They see everything in terms of prema. If they see the trees are prema. If they see the cows are prema. If they see the rivers are prema. For them, everything is filled with prema. So like that. Of course, this is a very high stage, and the Uttama has a direct realization of the Lord, so he's very highly qualified. But at the same time, he doesn't see the necessity of preaching. Definitely his mercy is very great if he gives mercy to a person. Very, very powerful, but nevertheless, he's not pushed to preach so much because he sees everything in Krishna and Krishna in everything. So, because of that, it is usually the Madhyamadikari who is the guru, the Shiksha, the Diksha guru, the one who preaches, etc. in this world. So he's the most ideal devotee for spreading the mercy of bhakti. Of course, there are exceptions. So you find a person like Narada Muni in prema. He's always giving out mercy like that. He's a great exception. Of course, he's also Shaktavesh avatar, empowered with bhakti, so that's his duty also to the Lord to spread bhakti everywhere. So we have exceptions, but in general, we say the prema bhaktas are not the real preachers. So as I mentioned, bhakti is independent. And everything else is dependent on bhakti. So the results of karma yoga and varnashram system are dependent on bhakti. If you do all the karma yoga, but you don't worship the Lord, then you don't go to Svargaloka. If you do Jnana Yoga, but you offend the Lord, then you don't get liberation. The same with the yogi. If you offend the Lord, you don't get liberation. So other processes are dependent on bhakti to get their goal. The bhakti is not dependent on karma, jnana, and yoga. If we do bhakti, but we don't do karma yoga, or we don't do jnana yoga, still we get perfection prema. So prema is not dependent on jnana yoga or karma at all. So karma yoga, you don't get anything. You respect the Lord a little bit, then you can go to Svargaloka, or you can nicely operate within the Varnashram system, be comfortable, and rise through the gunas, and come to become a Brahman, Sattva guna, etc. Huh? And when if you offend the Lord, you don't worship the Lord, the system doesn't work. Jnana Yoga, and you offend the Lord, say the Lord is full of, he's actually got no form, no qualities, etc. You don't even get liberation. If you accept the Lord, but you still want to merge in the Lord gives you that liberation. You can merge in the Lord. So, if you do Bhakti Yoga, and you don't do anything else, you can get Svargaloka, you can go to the higher planets, you can get liberation also. Of course, the devotees don't want either of these things. You can get the spiritual world, you can get a spiritual body, and the real desire of the devotees is to have prema and rasa with the Lord. So bhakti gives everything, and the other processes will only give if there's also some bhakti in the process. And so bhakti gives without the assistance of the other processes, but it gives all the results of everything else. So it's a superior process. So, bhakti is not dependent on physical or mental purity. Anyone can practice bhakti regardless of birth, gunas, etc. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Of course, the Brahmins can practice, the Kshatriyas can practice, the Vaishyas and Sudras, everybody can practice. And people outside the Varnashram system can practice, the Mlechas, the dog eaters, everybody else can also practice bhakti. If you're a Mlecha, you cannot even be a Sudra. You can't even be in the Varnashram system and practice Karma Yoga. And of course, if you're in a lower guna, you cannot practice Jnana. You have to be Brahminical to practice, study Vedanta and strive for liberation. So, one can practice in any state of mind, we can practice any place or at any time. So it's the most flexible of all processes. Karma, Jnana, and Yoga require certain conditions to start with. If you don't have those conditions, you can't even start the process. So bhakti is very, very special. Bhakti is not even dependent on faith. You say faith is the qualification. Yes, but even without faith, it has effects. So it's accidental bhakti without faith, as in the case of Ajamil. It has effect. Ajamil chanted the name of Narayan, not because he was worshipping Narayan, because it was the name of his son. And simply chanting the name of Narayan accidentally like that, without faith, destroyed all of his karmas. Doesn't give the highest effect, that is prema, but at least it destroys karmas. So this is a type of namabhasa without faith, and even that has effect. So accidental bhakti also is very, very powerful. So, bhakti is non-different from the Lord himself. It's all-pervading, independent, self-manifest, and life-giving, like the Lord himself. So it is very, very special. The bhakti emanates from the Supreme Lord as part of his Sarup Shakti. Process of Jnana and Yoga come from Sattva Gun, and Karma Yoga comes from Tamagun, Rajagun combination. So, completely different. Bhakti is coming from the Lord himself, and completely free of the gunas. So, this way we have bhakti as a very, very special process, a special energy of the Supreme Lord. So, one can practice without faith, but if one practices with faith, of course, that's much, much better. It is with faith that one can attain the Supreme Lord. But even then, the bhakti has to be of a certain variety. So, here we have the second chapter, the second shower of rain from the cloud of mercy in Madhurya Kadambini. So, the seed of bhakti is planted by the Madhyam Adhikari, and it begins to grow like a little plant. 2 little leaves come out. So that is an analogy for the 2 symptoms that manifest, 2 qualities of 6 qualities that are mentioned in the Nectar Devotion. These 2 qualities manifest within sadhana bhakti. One is kleshagni, destruction of suffering and the causes of suffering, and subhada, appearance of good spiritual qualities. So these things manifest within sadhana bhakti. And of course they go on in bhava and prema and become more perfect then. But they begin to manifest within sadhana bhakti itself. So, now what is this kleshagni, or destruction of suffering? What is suffering? So here, Vishnu Chakravarti follows Patanjali, and Patanjali analyzes suffering into these different elements: avidya, or ignorance, propensity to make a mistake, which is that so we say that what is impermanent is permanent, and what is permanent is impermanent. To say that was full of misery to be full of bliss, etc., and to be think that what is not the self to be the self. So we do everything opposite, and we think of material bodies, material happiness, etc. So that's avidya, ignorance. Asmita, identity with the body. So the first avidya, of course, also means ignorance of the Supreme Lord. We don't even know the Lord exists. Based on that, then we identify with our material body. Then we develop attachments, raga. We develop dvesha. We hate the obstacles to our material happiness. And abhinavesh, we cling to life and we fear death. So these are considered to be the 5 aspects of klesha, according to Patanjali. So he takes those. Basically like this. We have avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinavesha. Then we start doing actions in the material world. And what do the actions do? We get karma. That means we get a reaction to our action. We cause violence, and we get violence on ourselves in a future lifetime. So that reaction may take some time to manifest. It may take many lifetimes before it actually appears and we have the suffering. So those stages are called aparabdha, rudha, bija, parabdha. Gradually they manifest from most invisible stage, gradually until parabdha means you get the pain, you get the suffering. So of course the klesha starts with avidya, and then it turns into raga, dvesha, etc. We do the action, then we get the karma at the bottom, and then it goes aparabdha, rudha, bija, and then parabdha. Finally we get the experience of suffering. But it's all, the causes go back to that ignorance. So all of these kleshas are destroyed by bhakti. From the parabdha, and then when we get to the karma itself, from the parabdha, actually it's the opposite way around, from parabdha to aparabdha. So the aparabdha kuta bija parabdha is like aparabdha, you don't even know it's there at all. It's a future lifetime's suffering. So in this lifetime we don't know what that is even. If it's slightly manifested, if you were to actually get a dream about your future lifetime in some event, then that would be our kuta. Because that body itself in a future life is your karma for the future lifetime a little bit. So if it manifests in this lifetime, it would be a little bit of indication that you're of future karma in a future lifetime. So that's a kuta. When it's this lifetime and you get a little inclination ahead of time of what it is, it's called a bija. And when it actually manifests in this lifetime, it's called parabdha. So it goes through these stages, all the karmas, and all that's destroyed by process of bhakti. So we have subhada. Subha means spiritual qualities, such as disinterest in material affairs, interest in the Supreme Lord, mercy, forgiveness, respect, truth, simplicity, equanimity, fortitude, gravity, humility, etc. Some of these qualities manifest in people in sattva gun. They're sattva gun qualities. These qualities are not sattva gun qualities, even they look like it. We see a person in sattva controls his senses, controls his mind, etc. Devotee also does so. But it's different because it's all related to the Supreme Lord. So what bhakti produces are qualities which do not bind us to the material world, whereas sattva gun qualities bind us into sattva gun. So they're different. They're not related to the Supreme Lord. These qualities are related to service to the Supreme Lord. So that's what subhadat is. Spiritual qualities manifest. Just as Krishna has all wonderful qualities, the devotee worshipping Krishna also develops all wonderful qualities. So we start with Shraddha or faith, which means we have an acceptance of the existence of the Supreme Lord and the process of bhakti. And then, because we have that faith, when we begin to ask questions, we become inquisitive. So we seek out answers, and then we get sadhu sangha. And the devotees will give us instructions from the scriptures and explain who is Supreme Lord, what is process of bhakti, what is karma, etc. So then we start process of bhakti. But when we first start, it is not very steady. It is anishita bhajana kriya, unsteady practice. So, we start with faith. So, faith means we have a trust in the statements of Scripture. We don't question it. So we take Bhagavad Gita, we start reading it, and then Krishna says, you're not the body. Okay, we accept we're not the body, we're the soul. We don't say, well, how can I believe this? And we just accept it. If Krishna says, I'm God, we accept it. We don't challenge it. So some Shraddha is required to read Scripture. Otherwise, we won't believe it. So if we come to the Scripture and we believe it, that means we have Shraddha in it. And then we have a desire to follow those instructions of the Scripture. If it gives us instructions, we're willing to follow. That is also Shraddha. So, it may gradually arise, which is usually the case, or it may suddenly happen due to some external circumstances or whatever. But if it does arise, then it is very good fortune, because this is the beginning of bhakti. Then we can begin bhakti. So, what is sadhu sangha? Taking shelter of the lotus feet of the spiritual master. The faithful beginner in bhakti inquires from him about proper conduct. What should I do? How should I behave? So, he follows the instructions of the Guru. He associates with devotees, finds shelter and association of more realized devotees. So, the Madhyam Adhikari was a person who associates with devotees. But there are different types of devotees. We have superior devotees, equal devotees, inferior devotees in terms of faith. So, equal association with those on his level. Those who are higher, he takes shelter of them and follows their instructions. And to those who are lower, he gives instructions. That's the basic relationship between devotees. So then the process of bhakti begins, called bhajana kriya, actions of worship or devotional activities. And first it can be unsteady or nishtata. If one is very fortunate from beginning, one could be nishtata, of course, have nishta bhakti, but generally we go through a stage of anishtata first. And then we go to nishtata. So, What is that anishtata stage? There are some qualities there. Huh? Beginning. In the beginning, one may have false confidence. Huh? It's called utsahamai, over-enthusiasm. So Vishnu Chakravarti gives the example of a little boy who goes to school for the first time. And so he goes to school, and then when he comes out of the school, he's very proud because he's going to school, other kids are not going to school, huh? Like that. So he's got some false pride, so to speak, in his beginning something. When he's just beginning, actually, he's not accomplished anything, but he has pride in that. So a devotee may start practicing bhakti, then he has a sense of pride that he's superior to everybody else. Gana tarala, that means concentrated or dilute, intense or lax. So the person will switch between these two moods. Sometimes he's very enthusiastic, sometimes no enthusiasm. So that's called a sporadic endeavor. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. Indecision, viuda vikalpa. He will make all sorts of goals, and then he'll change them the next day. So one day he'll imagine himself as being a great sannyasi or a babaji or something. Next day he'll be imagining himself as a grihasta, like this. So we speculate about so many positions we could have. Struggle with maya, vishaya sangara. Sangara means a war, big struggle. Vishaya means material objects. So in anishtata stage, one is constantly struggling. Sometimes he wins, sometimes he loses. He succumbs to maya. Sometimes he wins, he's able to control his senses. So it's not a very healthy condition. Inability to uphold vows. Niyama akshama. So in other words, he vows, let's say, to chant 4 rounds. So he does that for 1 week, and then he reduces to 2 rounds or 1 round or whatever like that. Then he realizes, then he makes okay, I'll do 8 rounds. So then he'll make a new rule, but then he'll fall back to 4 rounds or 3 rounds or whatever like that. So he cannot keep his vows up. Whatever vow he makes decreases all the time. So these are some of the symptoms of anishtata bhakti. And obviously, if it's nishtata, then the opposite. No more struggle. Very easily upholds vows. Endeavor is steady. No pride. Doesn't speculate about his future like that. And then the last one is enjoying the waves. Taranga Rangani. So this is the Rangani are the enjoyment of the waves. What are the waves? The waves are the results of bhakti. So some of the results of bhakti can be used materially. So with bhakti we get wealth. With bhakti we get power. With bhakti we get followers. So a person may start enjoying these things, not using it for Krishna but for his own sense of enjoyment. That's called Taranga Rangani, enjoying the waves. So this is one of the symptoms of the new devotee who's anishtata. He'll start enjoying these results for himself. So that's the anishtata bhakti. Okay. Very good. Okay, any question there? Yeah. So, some things are favorable for bhakti, though they're not necessary for bhakti. So sattva gun is favorable for bhakti in the sense that sattva gun means control the senses, control the mind, detached from material enjoyment. One has acceptance of scripture, astika. So these are favorable for devotional service, for bhakti. Now there's the unfavorable thing in sattva also, because sattva gives rise to atmagyan. In one sense that's favorable, you're not the body, chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita. Unfavorable is that it can turn into impersonalism. So many people in sattva guna end up as gyanis or yogis instead of bhaktas. We see many people practicing yoga today, rather sattvic people, and they head off into the impersonal direction instead. So sattva guna can lead you in that direction of impersonalism also. So that's the unfavorable aspect. So certainly the varnashram system is favorable because it helps us control our senses, and the sattva guna is better than rajagun or tamagun, definitely. But at the same time, even sattva guna has this drawback. So therefore they're useful, but we shouldn't be too attached to them. We get too attached, then we get attached to the gunas, and we'll get attached to sattva guna. So we have to be careful of that. So in the nectar of the Bhagavatam, there in the 3rd canto, Kapila Dev discusses sattva guna bhakti, rajagun bhakti, and tamagun bhakti. But then Vishnu Chakravarti is in comment, says, actually, bhakti is not in the gunas. We're in the gunas. So that makes, we can say the bhakti is always pure, but our mind is contaminated. So it may be contaminated with tamagun, in which case the bhakti is completely violence motivated, more or less. We do the bhakti with goals of harming other people or whatever. That's completely, we can say, useless. Of course, because they're doing bhakti, then they rise up in the gunas a little bit. Rajagun bhakti, basically with a lot of desire to get things for oneself. And then we have sattvagun bhakti, more detached. So this can lead us to higher planetary systems and ultimately to impersonalism. So none of them are ideal. There's just like we say, it's mixed bhakti of sorts. So we can say it's mixed bhakti without following any of the varnashram ideals. Now if we mix karma, varnashram with the bhakti, a little bit of karma with the bhakti, we get karma Mr. Bhakti with the angas of karma yoga. I think we mix those angas with it, we can get karma Mr. Bhakti. And then we can start mixing the motives of karma yoga, svarga loka, etc. That's the bad mixture. If we just mix the actions which may be favorable to bhakti without those endeavors for svarga loka and karma yoga, it's okay. That karma Mr. Bhakti, okay. The karma Mr. Bhakti which is bad is when we mix the ideals, the desires of karma yoga in there. Then it becomes, go to svarga loka, etc. So if we mix that in the bhakti, then it weakens the bhakti. So the varnashram system can be done, but it should be done with detachment. Nishkama. And in that it is favorable for devotional development. Where it becomes unfavorable, then we have to reject it. So if there's worship of devatas, then we avoid that. If there's material results, we avoid that. In that it helps us control senses and regular stuff, we accept that part. Similarly for jnana, we could take part of the jnana process. Controlling the senses, controlling the mind, not associating with material people, those are favorable. Other elements we don't accept, like meditating on I am Brahman, etc. Then we don't accept those parts. Yeah.
So if one engages in physical activities but meditates during the meditation, is that counted as karma Mr. Bhakti or is that pure bhakti?
Oh, what type of activity? See, when we talk about karma Mr. Bhakti, we're talking about activities according to varnashram system, basically. If we're just doing activities like working, which got not related to the varnashram ideals as such, like sandhyavanana and or whatever like that, or your varna duties, then that's a little bit different.
What I understood was that Krishna Aroksha Bhakti consists of bhakti with intention and pure desire for liberation.
Yeah. We can say that's a type of mixed bhakti with, like, if we're mainly doing bhakti and then we have some other intentions, it can be karma Mr. Bhakti or Gyan Mr. Bhakti, and of the bad sort. Or if we have no desires in it and we're only doing it because it's favorable for bhakti, then we could call it it was okay, acceptable karma Mr. Bhakti in that sense, with no desires attached to it. In other words, we could do Shraddha rites, we could do Sandhavandana, we could do follow our varnashramic rules, etc. So there's no problem with those things. And we could call that, a little bit of karma mixed in. That wouldn't be bad. But the Aropa Siddha Bhakti, there's two other, there's Aropa Siddha Bhakti and Sangha Siddha Bhakti that are described in the Bhakti Sandarbha. So Sangha Siddha Bhakti is, it becomes bhakti by association. So in one sense, when we take the rules of karma yoga that are favorable and we do them along with bhakti, then it kind of becomes bhakti-ish, those rules. So it's called Sangha Siddha Bhakti. It becomes bhakti by association. And in Chaitanya Shikshamrita Bhaktivinoda calls it the Gona Vidhi, or secondary rules of bhakti. That is taking a bath according to the varnashramic rules, or following your occupation according to your varna, or samskaras, or whatever like that, for raising a family. So it becomes Sangha Siddha Bhakti, you could say. By association with the bhakti, it's non-objectionable and it's somewhat devotionalized. And the Aropa Siddha Bhakti is a little bit like, it's not bhakti, but we alter it a little bit to make it bhakti-ish. So we do the activities of karma yoga, and then we offer the results to Krishna. So then it becomes like bhakti, kind of. Though essentially those activities didn't arise out of bhakti at all. But they have a little bit of bhakti in them. Huh? Visuddha Bhakti. So that means bhakti with no other intentions except the desire to please the Lord. That is the only type of bhakti that will lead to prema, as Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, Madhurya. If we start mixing it, then we get karma Mr. Bhakti. Eventually the Lord is merciful and He'll take us beyond Svargaloka, beyond liberation, and we get Salokya and Sarupya. But our relationship with the Lord is dilute, not so strong, because of that mixture with the karma yoga. And if we do a little bit of Jnana yoga mixture, Jnana Mr. Bhakti, we get up to Shanta Rasa in the spiritual world. So it's only the pure bhakti, or Visuddha Bhakti, or Uttama Bhakti, and Niskinchana Bhakti, which will lead to Dasa, Sakta, Vatsalya, or Madhurya. Yeah, Sarup Shakti of the Lord, internal energy. How does he get bhakti? Oh, well, usually, how does he get faith, in other words? So faith usually arises by accidental bhakti. In other words, he gets contact with it. Because he has no faith, he is not looking for bhakti. So the only way is by accidental bhakti. So a devotee may give him prasadam, and he takes the prasadam, and he says, nice food. He doesn't know it's prasadam even. But because it is prasadam, it affects the atma. And atma becomes a little bit favorable. And if you take more and more prasadam, then the atma becomes more favorable. And more favorable. Or if he hears the name of the Lord accidentally, and he doesn't like it or dislike it, it just goes in his ear and says, okay. Then eventually, he gets Shraddha eventually. But it may take many lifetimes, because he's not looking for bhakti. So once the Shraddha comes, then he starts looking for bhakti. So therefore that Shraddha comes from these accidental, or what we call agyata sukritis, accidental bhakti, which are caused by devotees. If there's no devotees, there's no prasadam. If there's no devotees, nobody's going to hear the name. So it's caused by devotees, but accidental, so to speak. So due to that build-up, then eventually Shraddha arises. When Shraddha arises, then the person will accept and become curious and seek out bhakti. Well, the usual process is a gradual development. They may not follow exactly, Shraddha, Bhajana Kriya, Sadhu Sangha Bhajana Kriya, Nishtha, Ruchi, Sakti Bhava. That's the general progress. One may be quicker than that if there is less and less uparads. If there's more uparads, then it becomes more slow. And we'll get more definite stages like Nishtha, Ruchi, Sakti Bhava, and Prema. If they have no uparads, then you get very quick results, sometimes bypassing some stages even. So the quickness would depend on the amount of uparads. Sometimes the quickness in this lifetime is not because of this lifetime, it's because previous lifetimes they've already got to a certain level. And in this lifetime, suddenly they'll come up to that level again. But it's because they advanced in previous lifetimes to that level already, or almost to that level. Another cause of sadhana advancement is mercy. We can get mercy of the Lord, which is rare, and we can get mercy of great devotees, which is also rare, but a little more common. Like Narada Muni gives mercy to Mrigarhi the hunter, and in 3 months he gets bhava, and he can perceive the Lord. Or Prahlad, he gets instructions in the womb by hearing when Narada Muni instructed his mother, and then when he came out, he was a very high devotee when he was 5 years old. So this is mercy, advancement by mercy, but that's rare. Usually it is through sadhana, so it takes longer. Well, as I said, we discussed already, the Lord gives independence to the devotee to say where he can give out that mercy. But then, of course, if he's a lower devotee, his mercy will not show such effects as suddenly getting, bhava or prema. If he's in bhava or prema, then definitely then he can give mercy such that the person quickly advances to bhava and then up to prema or whatever. If he's not at that level, then of course it'll be slower. How to associate with such persons, you're saying? Or how to deal with such persons? Well, of course, in general, we say avoid the aparadis and the demons and things like that. So if we sense a person is right hostile to devotion, then generally we don't preach to them. We can avoid them, and we can give them mercy also in one sense. We can give them mercy by unconscious acts which they don't know are devotional, like give them prasadam or things like that. Just be kind to them and whatever like that. So we can, do certain things so they don't become unfavorable. And if if obviously they associate with devotees and they don't offend them, that's also good for them. If they accidentally get bhakti like prasadam, or they can see the form of the Lord to hear the name, then that's also good as long as they don't offend. So in general, if we have some question about them, best not to get too close and preach to them or whatever. We can avoid and find more favorable people to associate with. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Prabhupada, and then the Aparabda last. Yeah, according to that, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's an argument that goes, you cannot destroy your Prabhupada karmas, because if you destroy your Prabhupada karmas, your body would disappear. So therefore, the Gyanis say, we will destroy all your karmas, but not your Prabhupada karmas. And the same with the yogis. So your Prabhupada karmas are not touched. They will say that. But then we see from Bhagavatam, it says, your Prabhupada karmas are destroyed also, because it gives the example of, it says, even a dog eater who once purely chants the holy name, immediately, he is no longer a dog eater. He's qualified to do the act of a brahmana. So in other words, his Prabhupada karma of having a Chandala birth has disappeared immediately. So therefore, that Prabhupada karma is gone. So there's still the question of, what about the body? So the answer to that is given by Vedanta Sutra, actually. Baldev Vidyabhusan explains that for all devotees, though the Prabhupada karmas may be all gone, the trace remains. The Lord keeps a trace, including your body. Otherwise, there would be no devotees in the world, or prem bhaktas in the world even. You would never see a prem bhakta because they would disappear. Or anyone whose karma disappeared suddenly, they would disappear like that, the Prabhupada karmas. So he keeps them in the world for preaching and whatever like that. So it's not exactly karma because it's under the Supreme Lord at that point. But technically, all the karmas, Prabhupada karmas are gone, but it's a pattern of karma that remains, and the body remains, and he goes through activities which could be predictable by karma, but it's actually under the Lord, not under the law of karma anymore. So he says it is like, it's a pattern of karma only, it's not the real karma. So he gives the example of a piece of silk with its threads in it. When you take the piece of silk and you put it near a flame, but you don't burn it. But you get it very close and it starts drying out and it starts drying out like that. Then you take it away. It looks exactly like it was before. But if you touch it, it just crumbles away. So that is like the pattern of karma. It's like the crumbling thing. It looks like karma, but it also crumbles away. So there's an appearance of karma even for the prem bhakta. And his body remains. And he goes through different things like sickness or an accident or whatever. But it's under the Lord at that point. It's not real karma. Well, yeah, of course, to various degrees. Like Ajamil, he wasn't even a devotee, and all of his karmas were destroyed. Past, present, future karmas got destroyed because he accidentally chanted the holy name without offense. If you chant with offense, accidentally, or even with faith, then it's a slower process. But nevertheless, the karmas get destroyed, but not to the same extent that they all get destroyed. So some karmas may be there. Other karmas are not there, but still a pattern would remain for those karmas. Yeah. All the other ones, yeah. But the pattern of this karma remains, of this lifetime remains, with the body and other things. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, the major figures in our parampara, we can say, are prem bhaktas, but that's again rare, isn't it? One out of so many devotees. Yeah? So let's see, we have one line here, but then we have so many other lines of people in the Gaudiya Sampradaya and elsewhere in other Sampradayas, so to get a Prem Bhakt is still very rare. Oh, the process itself, if followed properly, will lead from anishtha to nishtha, from unsteady to steady. So that's discussed next, how that progress takes place. And then these symptoms in the first part with the Utsahamai and Tarangarangani, they will not be present as one goes into the nishtha stage of bhakti. If it comes on a nishtha stage, it's not very advisable because it's so unsteady. So it's more advisable to quickly pass beyond that and get to the nishtha stage. So that's caused by the bhakti itself. We have, bhajana kriya, and then we have nishtha. So the bhajana kriya of anishtha stage, and we have the nishtha stage, or nishtha bhakti. So the process of bhakti will lead through anartha vritti. That anartha vritti clears up the things that cause the anishtha. So the bhakti itself will cause that anartha vritti. The more we do bhakti, the more the anarthas get destroyed, until we get to nishtha. Mm-hmm.
Would it be accurate to say that that when one performs bhakti with a desire for material activities, both for material gain and makes it to gain material things that are common, that would be equivalent to karma bhakti, that aroksita bhakti, which is performed with a desire for material practice, can become karma yoga, and that aroksita bhakti, which is performed with a desire for bhakti, is what most devotees what I view
Repeat that. Because our Aropsita Bhakti actually isn't bhakti, but we kind of make it a little bit different to make it conformable to bhakti, like that. Whereas Sanghas, Sarupsita Bhakti is hearing, chanting, remembering, deity worship. The 64 angas of bhakti, those are called Sarupsita Bhakti. So other things are not bhakti. So there may be Sanghasita Bhakti, we do it along with bhakti and it becomes purified, or Aropsita Bhakti, things usually done by people who are not even practicing bhakti, but they altered a little, so it becomes kind of like bhakti, even though its origin is not bhakti itself. It's not the intention, original intention of doing that act was not bhakti, but we alter it so that it becomes, kind of related to the Lord. Yeah, like Nishkama Karma Yoga, offered to the Lord, Krishna Arpana, then okay, that's our ropes to the bhakti. Yeah. Well, if we're offering it to the Lord, usually it's nishkama also. So we have very little desire for Svargaloka, obviously. But those activities of karma yoga itself are not bhakti, like, Sandhavandana, Shraddha rites, samskars, and whatever like that. They're more or less their families that we do without desire for pious results or whatever. And then we offer everything to the Lord. So in that sense, it's connected to the Lord, so we get some connection with the Lord there. So this can lead to doing bhakti itself, and then ultimately we hope pure bhakti. That's maybe the good result of doing that type of activity, that they may associate with devotees, then take to the process of bhakti itself. And then they can get something more. But generally, if it's nishkama, it could lead to Brahmaloka and then finally to liberation or something. Yeah. Yeah. So that's Aropsita Bhakti when we offer it to Krishna. So the superior process is hearing, chanting, remembering. That's direct, Sarupsita Bhakti, much more powerful. Obviously, we have to support the body. So the best way to support the body is without sin, and then we can follow the varnas and the rules of varna and ashrama for that. So we follow varnashramic system for that. So that's the karma yoga system to support our material body. But at the same time, we should make a distinction. Simply doing that according to the rules is not the same as hearing, chanting, remembering, because its intention is to support the material body. But we're, spiritualizing it, so to speak. So the Sarup Siddha Bhakti is far superior. It directly produces bhakti and our manifest bhakti. What is it? Yeah, what about it?
The same thing like in normal varnashram, because every varnashram we connect to Krishna and then go from the activities.
Yeah, we can say Daivi Varnashram is an ideal Varnashram system with an emphasis on bhakti in it, more bhakti in it. And so then it's quite favorable for us. At the same time, then we also do bhakti itself, which is much more powerful. But that Daivi Varnashram helps us maintain our body with a minimum of obstacles. And we have our profession in that, and we can support our family within that.
In devotional service, we actually choose some service which is comfortable for us or what we like, rather than if I was still under the molds or how does the advancement happen. We take devotional service which we like or what's in our comfort zone.
Well, everyone's an individual. So within bhakti there are so many preferences one may have, and even one can have a preference for any rasa or any form of the Lord even. So one has that freedom of choice, and that's never discouraged. So in that sense, liking one particular service, there's nothing really wrong with that because it's a devotional service. Of course, in the beginning stages, the liking may also be based on material. There may be some material motivations or reasons behind it. But the more we advance, then the liking would be, let's say, spiritually based. The final cause. To be real, yeah. Yeah. Ignorance of Krishna, actually. Yeah. Well, this is the statement, the definition of Patanjali. So it is rather neutral. He's not directly doing it in terms of bhakti, whereas Bhagavatam obviously is in terms of bhakti. So ultimately, yes, it is absence of Krishna. But for the yogis and the Brahmavadis, it would be absence of Brahman or absence of Atma or something like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, one, of course, is, as I said, the destruction takes place slower if there is aparadhs involved. It could be this lifetime, it could be previous lifetimes. We don't know what it is. It could be, obstacles from previous lifetimes, which will affect this lifetime's bhakti also. That's one thing. Other thing is the pattern remains, in spite of the fact that the karma may be destroyed. So some pattern still remains. So that can cause some suffering also.
Third canto, I believe when the secondary creation of Brahma is described, there are 5 types of transactions.
Oh yeah. Under Tamisra, all this. Yeah.
How does that connect to these 5 types of
Oh, I think there are just various degrees of tamas. That's all. Ignorance. That's all. Or avidya, different degrees manifested in different ways. That's all.
So the 5 types mentioned in third canto are 5 types of avidya.
I guess so. Yeah. Or what manifests from that original avidya.
So then from those 5 types of avidya, you get deeper and deeper levels of raga and dvesha.
Mm. Mm. Okay. Hare Krishna.